Okay, thank you. If I can bring the meeting to order. Is everybody back in? Okay, can I once again welcome people along to the council chamber tonight onto our second meeting of the evening, the extraordinary council meeting that has been called. In case there's people here now that weren't here earlier, if I can just explain the evacuation procedures. We're not expecting the fire alarms to go off tonight, so if they do, we'll treat it for real. If we can leave this room by the doors either side or the one at the end in the public gallery and meet across the road at the Yorkshire Bank. If anybody needs assistance, make sure to give us a shout and we'll make sure that assistance is given. It's also a good time to remind people to put their phones on silent or turn them off. And also a reminder that the council does record its meetings and then put them out onto YouTube shortly afterwards. Okay, so if we can move on to item number 2 then, please, which is to receive apologies for absence.
Just similar to the previous meeting, Mr Mayor, we've got apologies from Councillor Bennett.
Okay, thank you. Item number 3, declarations of interest that aren't already printed. Councillor Good.
I have a family member who owns Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can I make a declaration that I have a family member who owns a share in some of the land that is in the borough plan? I have run it past Philip Richardson at the last time and he said I could speak, I couldn't vote, and as soon as I've spoken, I can leave the room. Is that correct tonight, please?
Yeah, that advice is correct.
Thank you.
Item number 4 are public questions and statements. Again, I understand that we have the questions in front of us. It isn't my intention to take any supplementary questions from them either. So if we can move on to that agenda item number 4. And the first speaker is Kyle Evans.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This evening I'd like to talk about why I believe members of the ruling Labour group and of course the Green Party should vote for the Conservative Party's motion tonight. The ruling Labour group have yet again decided to add more homes to the borough. What angers me more is that this council has refused to give the people of this borough a consultation. Over 1,500 homes have been added to this flawed plan. It's hardly something that's going to be unnoticed. It's very clear that this council tries to do the bare minimum and provides a third-rate service to its customers. As someone said at the borough plan examination hearing, a third-rate consultation is better than none. The borough plan consultation was an absolute shambles. The In Touch newsletter was not distributed until the consultation ended. Residents living opposite some of the major housing sites were not even told about some of the events. The last consultation may have been seen as legally compliant by the council, but it certainly did not meet the needs of the people of Nuneaton, Bedworth and Aldington. When talking to residents on HSG 4 on the Woodlands, which you may like to know, flooded a few days ago, and this is the council's justification to build 700 homes there. But yeah, I was talking to residents on the Woodlands on HSG 4. There were residents literally living in front of the fields where the houses were going to be built who didn't even receive letters about the consultation. It was seriously inadequate. Why not give the people of the borough a proper consultation on the new figure you want to push through with the block Labour vote? HSG 6, School Lane. There's land that morally cannot be in the plan because the owner doesn't want it to be in the plan. This is why you need a proper consultation. If people are deterred from having a say in these processes, when things like this are going to happen, in fact, the issue on HSG 6 may put the whole plan into question. And this might not have happened if there was an adequate consultation. I asked the Cabinet Member for Planning and Development, Councillor Danny Aldington, a question this evening. He answered one of the questions when he said that the council spent £19,000 on a barrister, which is absolutely ridiculous. But I also asked on my last question, would he make a public apology to the people of the borough for what they experienced over the consultation? I didn't get an answer. I believe residents in this gallery tonight are still waiting for an apology. Members of the Labour group tonight have a chance to do the right thing for once and stand up for their constituents. People at the last consultation were appalled by the process, and they're now being denied the chance to be consulted on by the next move to add more homes to the borough plan. This motion very simply asks for the council to let people have a say for these new proposed developments. It's something called democracy. This motion is not about accepting these new figures. That was pushed through last week by Labour. It's simply asking for a consultation.
Thank you,
Just,
Mr.
I've got one more sentence.
No, thank you, Mr.
If you
Evans.
members of the
Councillor
Labour
Aldington,
group
if you'd like to reply.
vote against this motion,
Councillor
okay,
Aldington.
the whole concept of democracy.
Not you. Was-
Mr Evans has said that extra houses have been added to the plan. That's simply not true, Mr Mayor. That is simply not true, Mr Mayor. I'll say it again. That is simply not true. Our allocations have been submitted to the planning inspector, which Mr Evans sat in on those deliberations a couple of weeks ago. The allocations have not changed. Our policy has not changed. All that is changed is an authority monitoring report, which is done every single year. We have new evidence, which is factual evidence, Mr Mayor, that cannot be disputed, which must then be presented to the inspector so that he has all the facts. As I said at the Cabinet last week, I said exactly the same thing at the Cabinet last week, Mr Mayor. There was also another issue that was raised around HSG 6, which is School Lane. I can say now with authority that the owner of that land submitted all of that land as part of the call for sites. They now want to remove that, which is their prerogative, which is their right as the landowner. All we can do as a council is take into account what we have at the time. If that landowner now wants to remove part or all of that land, that is their prerogative. So we have not gone behind anyone's back. We have not said we will take this bit of land and that bit of land. We simply cannot do that. When we make a call for sites, all landowners across the borough, whether their land is 10 square feet or whether it is huge swathes of land, can put forward that land to be included into the borough plan. And also, as Mr Evans was at the meeting the other week, he would have known that developers and landowners simply argued against the borough plan because they wanted their land into the borough plan. They didn't want to take the land out of the borough plan, they wanted it in the borough plan, Mr Mayor. That is the situation that we're currently in.
Thank you. Mr Chetkovich.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm speaking on behalf of Bulkington Residents' Voice and the Whitestone Residents' Action Group in support of a motion which is being put forward today. In terms of the Council's statement of community involvement, there has been no effective or meaningful interaction with the people of Bulkington or Whitestone. I brought this up at the Cabinet meeting which was held on Monday the 4th of September. I referenced document D8.1 pages 8 and 9 which is contained in the examination library. I thought that my statement had fallen on deaf ears. I was, however, delighted to receive a reply from the council officers the following day. Alas, there was no comment on the fact that the In Touch magazine had been held back and only delivered the day after consultation had finished and was in past tense, which shows no intent to deliver the magazine to coincide with the consultation. However, I was delighted to find that Bedworth and Bulkington Neighbourhood Watch Group meeting took place on the 6th of August 2013 at 7 p.m. on Poets' Corner and was attended by 32 people. Is this really viewed as a successful exercise in community engagement? Surely the consultation also started on the 31st of January 2017, so this was not a meeting about the borough plan as it had not yet been formulated in full. In document D8.1, you also mention a 17-minute long video as part of your consultation for borough plan. I could not find this video on YouTube, which is where the council said it could be found. Thank you for re-uploading this. However, this video is not about the borough plan specifically. It's about the core strategy issues and options 2009 consultation video. So actually, it is not about the final plan at all, but options of what you may or may not develop. This document is so out of date that all the figures of how many houses are required in the borough are laughable. I did, however, note that on the options given, many had advantages for Bulkington and Whitestone. There were, however, no advantages presented, only disadvantages. It also acknowledges the use of your traffic light system. These areas should only be used as a last resort, and we showed up in red. Finally, you say that you used Oak FM to advertise the borough plan consultation. Consultation for the plan began on the 31st of January. However, Oak FM ceased to transmit on the 28th of July 2016. So how can it have been used to publicise the final borough plan and consultation? I've passed these comments to the Inspector, Mr Spencer. I would specifically like to ask the Council the following question, and I have a further four which I would like a written reply because we were not allowed to ask them because apparently it's unconstitutional. I would like to say we did have 12 people, and these were the questions of 12 people, so next time we will submit 12 individual questions and 12 individual statements if you won't meet us halfway. However, my question, Mr Mayor, is why have Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council not done a grassroots consultation which focuses on reaching the largest number of people in all parts of the borough and not just a Nuneaton and Bedworth-centric consultation?
Councillor Aldington.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The consultation on the borough local plan included drop-in sessions which took place in all of the localities of the borough.
Please, you've asked a question.
The Council has produced several pieces of evidence which details the consultation which has been submitted to the Planning Inspector and published on the Council's website. This includes a statement on the media coverage and advertisement of the consultation action plan and a copy of the consultation summary, which was widely available. It has also submitted a copy of the sample letter sent out to properties close by the strategic allocations, which is a total of 5,060 letters. Out of those 5,060 letters, 676 were sent out within Bulkington. All of this information has been submitted to the Planning Inspector for his consideration.
Could I ask Carl Mayor to ask his question, please?
In Councillor Aldington's press release dated the 25th of August 2017, he states a number of planning consents given in the last year is exceptional.
Can I just... Sorry, Mr Mayor, that doesn't appear to be the question that I have... Sorry?
It's just the paragraph down.
Yeah, I was on that.
Oh, yeah, I'll say, yeah. My apologies, it was the way I've seen it there.
In Councillor Aldington's press release dated the 25th of August 2017, he stated the number of planning consents given in the last year is exceptional. Developers, though, have exploited national policy which has left the council powerless to refuse any major housing developments as the borough does not have a 5-year housing supply. Also, before recent Stage 1 hearings began, the Inspector raised concerns with all parties involved. These included public consultation and the duty to cooperate. Question 17 read, what dialogue has there been between other HMA authorities between the close of publication on the 13th of March and the submission on the 6th of June? The Council's response to this question seems to highlight them missing a lot of very important meetings on our behalf. In one particular paragraph, it states that officers from the Duty to Cooperate group asked for one-to-one meetings with authorities and, if possible, the relevant cabinet members. Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council accepted this. However, Cabinet member Councillor Aldington could not attend due to work commitments. This comes as no surprise to the Action Group after hearing from legal eagles at the hearings, who seem to think the paper trail and transparency regarding the Council and its duty to cooperate memorandum of understanding meetings are non-existent. Like I said at last week's Cabinet meeting, the sharks are circling. Councillor Aldington could not even be bothered to turn up to the hearings themselves and went 6 months without attending important meetings of this council prior to being appointed the portfolio holder in 2015. Perhaps he should be called the portfolio holder for Scarlet Pimpernellism. Question. In Councillor Aldington's press release dated the 25th of August 2017, he stated planning consents in the last year have been exceptional and developers have exploited national policy which has left the council powerless. Very interesting comment, Mr Aldington. Is this a dig at the planning committee? Are they powerless? Please justify the word powerless in this statement. And I would also like for other questions that I'm not allowed to ask tonight. I'd like a written response to them as soon as possible, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. That will be the case. Yeah. Councillor Aldington, you wish...
The Applications Committee has a difficult job to do and delivers its responsibilities to a high standard. The Council at all times has to demonstrate that it can deliver a 5-year supply of readily available housing land. If it cannot do so, then its ability to refuse planning applications for residential development is severely limited. For example, Plough Hill in Nuneaton. This Council's Planning Applications Committee refused that application, but as Mr Mayor knows full well, the planning laws being what they are, skewed towards developers, this allowed the developer to appeal, which they won. At present, this council cannot demonstrate a 5-year supply of housing, and so the planning committee can feel powerless in dealing with residential planning applications. I would also like to state, Mr Mayor, that at the Cabinet last week, main part of the report was actually about getting a 5-year land supply, so that actually when you sit down in your planning committees, I'm not on the planning committee as you know, then you have all of that evidence behind you so that you can feel less powerless.
Thank you. If I could ask Michelle Kondakor to make her statement, please.
Thank you. Well, I think the wording of the motion is actually very poor. This consultation doesn't need to be just about the overspill. We've never had a proper consultation on the figures themselves, never mind any overspill. So it's much more fundamental than the accepting any overspill from Coventry or any other parts of Warwickshire. And it's not about them against us, Coventry against Nuneaton and Bedworth, or Nuneaton versus Bedworth, or Nuneaton versus Bulkington and things. No green belt should be used anywhere in the country until all other available land has been used. It's as simple as that. And there's so many other things that come into this. The numbers then obviously knock on to traffic flows, the air quality. I mean, Councillor Longden earlier on, in answer to my question, said, oh, well, in the borough plan thing, 2030, the air quality will all be okay. I don't care about 2030 at this moment in time. I care about all the years between now and then. We are getting poisoned. There's more and more evidence and things. Speak to public health people in Warwickshire, as I have, and they will, they say it is a real problem. And so this numbers game, it needs to be about the figures themselves right from the very beginning, not just about any overspill. And, obviously, numbers then knock on to everything else. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Aldington, you wish to reply?
Clarify a point about brownfield versus greenbelt land. We cannot legally demand that brownfield site is brought forward first above greenfield site. Our brownfield site currently equates to about 2,500 houses. Quite clearly, even if we were to go with Councillor Kondakor's purported 6,500 houses, or even 7,900 houses, which originally came up, then there would still need to be houses built elsewhere. So we cannot legally, as a council, say you will bring that site forward first, you'll bring that site forward next.
That takes us on to item number 5, which is the notice of motion housing numbers. Councillor Wilson, your name is at the top of the list, so it's down to you if you wish to move the motion.
Thank you. On the agenda. And to tackle one point first, I actually agree with the sentiment of what most of Mrs Kondakor actually said. However, we designed this motion specifically about the Cabinet item, which we have been denied an opportunity to call in and to scrutinise.
Councillor Wilson, I'm sorry, I think we're falling. I think you'll be able to make those points during any debate.
I'm not allowed to debate. I'm only allowed to move the motion and give comments with the motion. That's my understanding.
Sorry? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We have tried on many occasions to address the other issues and we have failed. So the only option we have available to us at this specific moment in time in this specific policy is this motion. And talking about what we have done in the past, in 2012, 16th of October 2012 to be precise, we moved a motion that minutes should be circulated to all members. Incidentally, at this meeting, then Councillor Bill Shepherd had informed the Council that all Labour members on the Borough Plan Working Party were whipped. Hence why we no longer participated. If the decision is already made, what is the point in us attending? So we tried then to amend things. Then on the 13th of August 2014, it's all public, all recorded votes, we proposed a motion which would have established a formal committee with formal agenda, with formal minutes, and open to the public to attend and scrutinise us, subject to the provisions of the Local Government Act. And now it's a shame that yet again we are here in this position. We're here because Labour cannot and will not stand up for the residents of Nuneaton and Bedworth. They are giving in to Coventry. Nuneaton and Bedworth Labour are doing Coventry Labour's will. That is it, pure and simple. Now, Councillor Aldington says there is no change of policy. That is misleading. We have now agreed to take Coventry's overspill. The Cabinet report actually says, with these additional houses he has now found, for the room to build, we can now accept the Coventry overspill. That will go to the inspector, and that is them trying to buy off the other councils and the other objectors to say, we can go ahead with this plan. And then he said that we are not increasing density. Well, and I challenged him over this at Cabinet. Well, Councillor Harvey likes to brandish his dictionary, so I've extracted this from the Oxford English Dictionary today, the definition of density. The quantity of people or things in a given area or space. Now, if you are now putting 4,000 odd houses into a space which contained 3,500 houses, you don't have to be Einstein to work out you are increasing the density. Now, in the Council's own consultation document, the flawed consultation document, it says that we have roughly 1,600 dwellings per hectare, whereas the Warwickshire average is 277, a gross disproportionate amount compared to the rest of Warwickshire. But Labour opposite now want us to take up to 2,000 dwellings per hectare and build almost 750 houses per year with a trajectory on the plan. Now, we had a consultation on 13,500, which I fundamentally disagree with. But we had no consultation at all on 15,300. And what Labour have done by marking it not for calling and trying to hide behind another agenda item is cheating residents out of the opportunity to have a voice on what you are doing to our borough, not your borough, our borough, in what is happening. Now, at the consultation, at the inspection event, the Council's QC, who we now know we paid £19,000 for the privilege of, said that a third-rate consultation is still a pass. But does that mean we now have a third-rate borough plan? I say the residents deserve better than a third-rate borough plan. Now, my primary concern is infrastructure. If you are increasing the number of dwellings in an area, does that mean we are going to get one less school, one less GP surgery, one less play area, one less shop, or one less community centre? Any less provision of those is a damning indictment of your actions to this borough because you are selling us down the river for your friends in Coventry. Now, the green belt should be protected as far as possible. And yes, there are instances where green belt should be declassified, but as Mrs. Kondakor said, they should be the absolute minimum. And if Coventry want us to take more of their housing, they should declassify more of their green belt before they expect us to sacrifice for them. Now, we hear, Mr. Mayor, quite often the chattering from the Labour Party nowadays that they are for the many and not the few. Well, this is a borough plan designed by the few and imposed on the many. We will suffer. You probably won't, but it is my residents and those residents up there who will do the suffering. So I say we have a third-rate borough plan from a third-rate Labour council and we deserve better. Vote for this motion, give the people what they deserve, a proper consultation and a say on their own future. I move the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Is that seconded?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I propose an amendment to this proposal that's just been voiced. There seems to be a lot of confusion not only in this chamber, but probably throughout the whole of the borough, about green belt. I'd like to propose that we take out the paragraph A of the proposal and declassifies more of its own green belt to accommodate its own housing requirements. Green belt's important wherever it is, especially the green belt between the Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council and Coventry. You know, if they declassify their green belts, that's the same effect of us declassifying ours. Arable land is not all green belt. Okay, we don't need to build on any green belt anywhere in the country, really. So I'd like to propose, I'll repeat that again, where it's annotated A, paragraph A, just make it Coventry City Council reevaluates its housing land supply, full stop. Delete the rest of that sentence, please.
Okay, thank you. Is that seconded?
Councillor Bonner, Councillor Bonner, Councillor Bonner, Councillor Bonner, Councillor Bonner have some sympathies over this issue. The fact of the matter is, Greenbelt is being looked at, whether we like it or not. And his intended amendment, and I'm sure the legal officers will look at this, would actually negate the intention, it certainly negates the intention that we had when we drafted the motion, and therefore would be unconstitutional as an amendment. That is my viewpoint.
Yeah, so I'm just pondering what's just been said. Does any other member wish to speak to the amendment? Councillor Golby.
The removal of Greenbelt, we are discussing it from our own point of view. I think if you want to make representation to Coventry, then that's fine, but this isn't a discussion about Coventry removing their Greenbelt as such. It's about us not having to remove ours. So if you want to make representation to Coventry, that's fine, but this is not what this motion is about.
Is any other member?
Chair, am I allowed to... the rules in there. Are you allowed to speak on the amendment and then, when you've had a vote on that, come back to the...
Yeah, we're speaking...
Down as Greenbelt. Isn't Greenbelt at all. It's areas of restraint. But really, Mr Mayor, I don't want to be voting about that because it's about the whole issue I want to speak about.
Councillor Tromans.
Yeah, I'm going to have to identify which bits of Greenbelt in Coventry, Coventry's Greenbelt, they may choose to declassify. None of us know that. It's misleading to say it would be that bit there. And I also have to, again, Mr Mayor, draw your attention to the fact that the amendment would negate the meaning of the original motion, and therefore we shouldn't really be speaking to it. It should be disallowed. Thank you.
Well, if there's nobody else, Kondakor, then the vote.
From what I've heard, and I'll be advised if I'm wrong, it doesn't appear to me to negate the main motion. You happy with that, yeah? So I'm going to take now... Councillor Kondakor had the right to come back, and then it will be Councillor Bonner as the mover.
Thank you to have had a joint motion with the Conservatives. And the reason we're talking about this amendment is to actually make this motion acceptable to us who are actually trying to save as much countryside as possible. We clearly want Coventry to look again at its housing numbers. Coventry is highly based on students. They're building incredibly high densities in the city centres, and they're very dependent upon migrant flows. We, particularly myself, have been to the Coventry inquiry and provided evidence to the Coventry inquiry about what's going on with the Coventry's population stats. And we are happy that actually if we got the Coventry figures right, we wouldn't need Coventry to significantly be pushing into Nuneaton. There aren't the jobs in Nuneaton. Coventry may need to push a bit into Warwick, but the bit about re-evaluating Coventry's housing need and supply is really important, and we really support that. But as a NIMBY, I support the people in Bedworth Woodlands. I support the people's campaign to save the Coventry Greenbelt. I think we shouldn't be telling Coventry to build on their countryside until we've actually done the calculations fairly. The joint committee isn't a decision-making body, unlike Councillor Aldington says. We do need a proper debate on it, and that is why I would be happy to support the Conservative motion if it didn't start to tell Coventry to build on their green belt. Because I think we are stronger if we actually stand up for all our countryside and build sustainable towns where we don't spread out into the green belt and into countryside. We actually try and build sustainable communities, and we build on the countryside the last measure. So that's why I'm proposing this amendment, because there's no way I can support telling Coventry to build on their green belt. I can totally support Coventry looking at its numbers, looking at what's happened with Brexit, looking at what happened with their universities and their student populations, and actually getting it right. But yeah, this amendment does need to pass to make it acceptable.
We've been talking quite a lot tonight about what goes on in this building, and I'll be surprised if anybody here understands everything that goes on in this building. I, for one, willing to admit I've known very little. But after 2 out of 3 years on the Planning Applications Committee, one thing I have learned, we quite often have problems refusing planning applications because of our guidelines. But the one big development we did manage to stop, I can't remember how many 100 houses it was off Gypsy Lane, because it was on Greenbelt. That's quite one of the obvious things in the planning portfolio, the planning portal, sorry, not portfolio, that makes it easier to refuse a planning application. Yeah. So we might be just talking round and round the Wrekin here and actually...
I'm just going to say, Councillor Bonner, I think we are starting to do that.
Yeah, okay.
And your comments may well be for further on.
Anyway, I'm just going to echo everything that my colleague, Councillor Kondakor, said. I think if we're going to make it stand, we need to make the amendment. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. An amendment, the wording in paragraph A, so there would be a full stop at the end after supply and then delete everything afterwards. All those in favour of that? And against? And abstentions? Okay. So that isn't carried, it doesn't become substantive, so we go back to the original motion. Any member? Councillor Harvey.
Sustained attempts to mislead people. You know, Mr. Mayor, I hope in the 40-odd years I've been on this council, I've had manners to listen to other people. Unfortunately, recently, that seems to have gone by the board with some people. Despite trying to mislead people, this business regarding the housing market area comes from the government. It comes directly from the Department of Communities and Local Government, where Marcus Jones is a minister. We are obliged to look at the housing market area, which has been decided that this is Coventry and Warwickshire in our case. In different areas, it's other situations as well. So, for instance, in North Warwickshire, it includes Birmingham, which is why they're meant to be taking more houses from Birmingham as well as Warwickshire. The Joint Committee, which I personally have agreed is not a decision-making body, the Joint Committee is a body made up of basically the Chief Officer and the leader, or their substitute, of the 5 district councils of Warwickshire, Coventry and the County Council. Now, in actual fact, the County Council should not be voting about housing matters because they are not a housing authority. But they did, in actual fact. Coventry, not once, in all the meetings I've attended, have approached me or the managing director in relation to housing numbers. The situation was, Mr Mayor, that our officers had to meet behind the scenes. This is what Councillor Kondakor likes to think is secret, but that's their job, to go and meet and come away with the total housing market area. It isn't because Coventry wants this or doesn't want this. Other areas in Warwickshire, North Warwickshire, Warwick District, Stratford-on-Avon, Rugby, most of them are taking far more houses as a result of what's called Coventry overspill. It doesn't actually mean people set off from Bull Meadow bus station, get on a bus and move here. It's because of the market for housing in Coventry and Warwickshire, which isn't easily divided just by a line on the map. People don't live their lives like that. So I live just across the border from North Warwickshire. So whatever happens there, they're building 600 houses just up the road. It affects me. Whatever happens in Kersley affects about people in Coventry, Kersley, affects the village of Kersley. At the leaders' meeting, and this is well known to the people opposite, when we were suddenly presented, before we'd done all the details of the borough plan, suddenly presented from Warwick District, I believe it was, numbers and a memorandum of understanding for these numbers, I was the only one who refused to sign. And there were residents in the public gallery at Leamington from this borough. I was the only one. As a result, I was attacked relentlessly by every Conservative leader at that meeting and at subsequent meetings where Councillor Jackson attended one following, where she was also attacked. Very, very forcibly, even by some of their officers, which is totally improper. Because our plans had not been fully developed, Mr Mayor. So every Conservative councillor, the County Council voted against us, North Warwickshire did, Warwick, Stratford, they're all Conservative, Rugby did. Coventry never said a word to me, they never said a word to Alan Franks. So it isn't a simple thing of saying Coventry wants Nuneaton and Bedworth to take this number. These are numbers decided throughout the housing market area. You can believe me or believe me not, you just have to look at the minutes of all those meetings, you have to look at the facts that are before you, and you have to look at where this has come from. And it's come from the government. We cannot get a borough plan through or any other planning. We shall be planning by appeal forevermore unless we agree to a situation within the housing market area. And the numbers for Nuneaton and Bedworth are very low compared to some numbers. Very, very low. That could be why they were ganging up on us.
Councillor Harvey, just give me one moment, please. I'm really grateful that we've got a lot of attendance here at the meeting tonight. But regardless of that, people ask questions, people get answers. You may not like the answers you're given, that's your right. But please respect the person that's giving them, whoever they are. Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
That's why, Mr Mayor, the others were putting a great deal of pressure on Nuneaton and Bedworth. And every single one of those leaders in Warwickshire was a Conservative. This is a plan that has come from a Conservative government. So however much you might try to turn it around and say it's all our fault, this is the law, Mr Mayor. And well, I've been leader and I know...
Here's that the leader is saying it's houses, that's... You're misleading the public, and I make that point of order, Mr Mayor.
Well, I have to look at the housing market area, and in our case that is Warwickshire and Coventry, and all of the other authorities do. It is the law that comes from the government, Mr Mayor, and we have never broken the law.
There's no other member? Councillor... Well, I'll go to the foot of our stairs. Well, Councillor Kondakor.
Probably uniquely among councillors here, have been to a very large number of the joint committee meetings. I've taken my video camera and I've put those meetings on YouTube. I actually have a great insight as to what the joint committee did and the history around us foolishly accepting these numbers. The government expects every council to work out its objective housing need, OAN. And that number for Nuneaton and Bedworth should be around 3,000 a year, 300 a year, 6,500, 6,800 over the 20 years. We then have a process where councils see what economic differences will happen. They have to provide for economic growth, etc. So over the housing market area, they also do economic-based calculations. And for the whole of Coventry and Warwickshire, which I think everyone agrees is the housing market area, the demographic need, if you add up the objective need for all the people growing old, being born, etc., is 4,000 homes a year. If you look at the economic picture around Coventry and Warwickshire, how many houses you need and how many people to supply all the jobs, that is currently 3,700 a year. So you see these two numbers are fairly similar. But what has happened with the officers group and the process is cherry picking's happening, and all these numbers are gradually getting bumped up. So the combined plan for all the 6 councils in Coventry and Warwickshire is about 4,700 a year, because it's the same as this rule where the government wants everyone to do better than average at a certain subject. Yet you can't everyone do better than average. If more people are working in Coventry and living in Coventry, one is going to have an upside and one is going to have a downside. What should happen with the housing system is no matter how you chop the 6 councils up in Coventry and Warwickshire, you should add up to 4,000 or 3,700. By the way the whole process has been going, the corrupt process cherry-picking a Coventry plan based on demographics and a Nuneaton plan based on economics and adding a fudge factor here, we have got to a silly number. And I come back to the fact that Coventry is building 1,000 houses a year. We're being expected to build in 2020 1,500 houses in a year. We have no universities, no massive factories. We have enough work for 300 extra houses a year. There is no magic way to build 1,500 houses in this borough a year. There is no infrastructure and there's no money to pay for infrastructure. Dennis Harvey did have, Councillor Harvey, a very good rant when he got presented with 13,000, 14,000. But he actually agreed in a meeting in Coventry to the methodology, how we're going to allocate this 4,700. And the overflow from Coventry was allocated on the basis of commuting flows. This is nuts because a lot of people in Nuneaton and Bedworth commute into Coventry. So by allocating the overflow on commuting numbers, the more you've got a problem with lack of work, the more people have to commute to Coventry, the more housing you had to take. So the day in the Coventry meeting where Dennis Harvey, Councillor Harvey, accepted we would take housing based on commuting flows, the 14,000 was then set. It was set in stone. We should never have agreed that, and we should have actually had committees debating here how many houses we should have accepted, not just saying, oh yeah, that's okay, we'll do this, oh, that's okay, we'll do this, oh, I don't like that number, we're being picked on. We have made an almighty mistake with this process. We should have had a proper scrutiny committee. We should have looked at the numbers. We just talked about it. And we should have discussed and fought for a housing target, 6,500 plus or minus a bit, not gradually let it get ratcheted up. And it's interesting that North Warwickshire, it's taking a lot more housing and it's getting loads of infrastructure money from the Birmingham area to pay for the infrastructure for that extra housing. We're taking Coventry housing that probably doesn't need to exist because the students don't want to move from the University of Warwick and the University of Coventry to live in Nuneaton or Bedworth and get the 48 bus back into Coventry. Yeah, it's just not going to happen. But the way the system is working, we're assuming a massive flow of population to Nuneaton and Bedworth. It's going to be a total disaster. We're going to be housing all over the place and loads of half-built sites. Because we're not going to build 4,500 homes, we're going to build the wrong 7,000 or the wrong 8,000. We'll have lots of half-built sites, we'll trash the Woodlands, we'll trash Wellington, we'll trash Bulkington, but we won't actually finish any of them. In the last couple of years, we've never finished any house building because there's actually not enough demand to actually finish off sites. So we end up with 20 or 30 half-finished housing estates.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Tromans. Tromans.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So shambles, a word we've heard a fair bit tonight, and it seems that every time we stand up and talk about the borough plan, the word shambles comes up and up and up again. And is it any wonder? I mean, you know, we have to it was flawed from the very start. The whole premise was wrong. We should have heard, as has been mentioned earlier tonight in several comments, we should never have had numbers as high as the ones that were proposed by the Labour group. Thousands more than they needed to be. And actually, when you take into account the employment that's been mentioned as well, given that the employment levels that were promised and envisaged by the Labour group have never materialised, the numbers were nowhere near as high as that, you would expect the numbers that were proposed to actually go down, not go up even further. If we had a reasonable target to start with, if it had been done sensibly, if it was a few thousand to start with, and that had been amended properly because of the employment numbers, then maybe, just maybe, taking a few more, a modest number of houses to meet a wider area target would be reasonable, if we had the infrastructure and all the rest of it put in place. It might be reasonable. But I'm afraid we're stuck. We're stuck with where we are. And that is, stuck with thousands of new houses being approved, voted through by the Labour majority, and thousands more proposed for greenfields in our area, and all without meaningful infrastructure delivery. By increasing the housing density, as we heard from Councillor Wilson, voicing a very real fear here, we're going to lose what little additional amenity and green space and whatever was going to be in these new developments, and that's only going to exacerbate the infrastructure failures even further. And is it any wonder that because of this, all this shambles, the public have seemingly lost faith in the leadership of the council? I'm not surprised. I mean, we're talking about the sleight of hand here over the Coventry housing numbers. And it's right for people seemingly to doubt the intentions and the words of members opposite. Because if things were as they were portrayed, and it was a refusal to take these other numbers, and nothing was I never spoke to people in Coventry, I've never agreed anything, and we've heard that's probably not quite correct, then why, when housing developments were approved that weren't in the draft borough plan, why weren't other areas in the borough plan taken out? Yeah? If you've got a borough plan for 13,000 and that includes housing in this area, but you approve some over here, surely the right thing to do is take those numbers out of the areas that you'd already agreed. But they didn't do that. And now we know why. Because they knew all along they were going to be taking their buddies in Coventry's housing overspill.
Mr. Mayor, I have just been accused, more or less, of lying. I believe that's a very serious allegation to make, particularly from the Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner.
Confused because I don't think that they're actually debating the motion that they've got on the on here. They seem to be debating the borough plan, which, by the way, was submitted to the planning inspector some time ago. So let's get back to the motion then, shall we? This motion is an absolute nonsense, or to quote Councillor Tromans, a shambles. Now, before you start jumping up and down that I've called a motion that purports to protect the interests of residents nonsense, let me explain why. The first point in the motion: do you honestly believe that Coventry are going to restart their plan process? Do you really believe they're going to do that? The time to object to the Coventry plan was when they consulted on it. You could have done this at the time and you did not. The second point, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Golby have said that this isn't about Coventry. It quite clearly is about Coventry. Space with the residents.
I believe Councillor Golby hasn't spoken yet on this motion.
Oh, okay. I retract that then, Mr. Mayor. I apologise. Okay. So the second point on that then. We would have to consult on any increase in housing numbers. Therefore, any application to this council, not within the current borough plan that has been submitted to the inspector, would have to be consulted on, no matter how small, before presumably going to the Planning Applications Committee. This is ludicrous, Mr. Mayor. But again, only in those areas that were identified in the report last week. So not the Woodlands, not School Lane, places like that. Only those areas identified. So they're protecting a certain part. It's said that extra housing has been added to the plan. And again, I'll repeat, this is simply not true. Our allocations have been submitted to the planning inspector, and I said that at Cabinet last week. Councillor Wilson talks about bending to Coventry, and again, he is misleading everyone here tonight, as he well knows. The extra housing was agreed by all districts across Warwickshire, except Nuneaton and Bedworth, as part of the duty to cooperate. This motion would entail significant delay, during which time we would have no 5-year land supply, something which we have been vehemently accused of by the opposition in the past, that we've delayed things. They now want to delay it. They now want to take us right back to the beginning. And I'll leave everyone with this, Mr. Mayor. The government is due to introduce a new method to calculate housing numbers. If we were to go back to the beginning, this would mean going right back to the drawing board, and if there was a significant delay, we could get extra housing. And that would be on this motion tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Margrave.
To ask both for your leniency and discretion, in that I'd like to make an interest, but I've actually got a question, because at the beginning of this meeting, a councillor was advised that the same rules applied in relation to the Borough Council, the Borough Plan Full Council as due tonight. And I was advised on that evening that I wasn't allowed to speak in the debate and I had to leave before the vote. So I wanted to declare the same interest that I declared on that evening and say that I will leave before the vote. But if Councillor Gutteridge is able to speak, with your permission, I would like to do so if Councillor Gutteridge does. But if he doesn't, I will leave before the vote if the rules do still apply. I would like some advice on that, because I am confused about whether the rules do apply, because I thought this was something different. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Well, if you're confused, so am I. It may help if you can tell us what your interest is that you're declaring.
I'm both an employee and a board member of Orbit Heart of England Limited, and also a shareholder. That is a housing association, a registered provider, but it's a deemed pecuniary interest, so I'm told. I'm also, by virtue of being a member of General Synod, a member of every parish council in this diocese and a member of Deanery Synod, and they will benefit from the sale of some land. And this was raised at the Borough Plan Council meeting. So that was referred to this evening, Mr. Mayor, and I just want to seek clarity.
Yeah, well, thank you. And hopefully we've got some. I mean, normally you can have advice, but it's up to the individual member whether they take the given is. It would indeed be the same advice as been given to Councillor Gutteridge. You could speak, but then you wouldn't be able to take part in the vote, and you would have had to leave the room before that vote's taken.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Right. Councillor Gran.
Firstly, on this amendment, the council needs to stop blaming the government. They said the mean government is forcing them to do their job. What a shame. You have to do your job just like everybody else in the world. By the way, we just had a general election, and did Labour put in their manifesto that councils wouldn't have to put together a local plan if they were in power? I don't think they did. The residents here deserve consultation on the increased numbers of houses put forward in this plan. The portfolio holder has denied that the numbers are increasing and that the increase in density at HG1 is happening. I think that he's denying the obvious truth. I think he thinks that if he keeps denying the obvious truth, that enough people will start to believe him. The Borough Council's now paid £19,000 for a legal representative, which could have been spent on informing every resident in the borough about the consultation when it happened, could have been spent on more consultation drop-ins, could have been spent on an In Time In Touch magazine in January, and sending officers to represent the borough to over local authorities' local plan consultations. The plan might be thrown out because of the poor consultation that took place, and members opposite can redeem themselves tonight by properly consulting on their plans to increase these numbers, which I fundamentally disagree with and would put evidence showing how that's completely wrong at this potential consultation. And market forces are showing that far fewer houses are being built each year than the council projects we need. And therefore, I think the council needs to pay attention to this and look what's happening in the housing market and realise there's no demand for all these houses in Nuneaton and Bedworth, these 15,000 houses. The duty to cooperate is about much more than just doing what benefits Coventry. It's also about engaging with Coventry and other councils to prove that this council doesn't need anywhere near as many as 15,300 houses. And I saw very little, if anything, at these events from the council to try and do that. I kept hearing the words at the examination, which I was present at, which many of the members opposite weren't at, just letting the council officers be there. They weren't here to represent the plan themselves, which they wholeheartedly believe in. They just kept using the word bare minimum so much. And that's the poorest strategy that this council could possibly take. We need a bare maximum plan that saves our green belt. So by supporting this motion, it could be the first instance of the council actually doing something to help residents, but I'm not going to hold my breath.
Councillor Brindley.
I've previously raised quite a number of concerns regarding the borough plan, and in particular to do with its sustainability in this chamber. I'm not going to bore you with going over them again. As Councillor Aldington correctly said, this motion isn't actually about that, and unfortunately that ship has sailed in any case. At the last full council meeting, I asked Councillor Aldington if the borough plan would reflect the new proposals for further development on the long sheet. So when I then hear that housing numbers have changed, I'm thinking, great, maybe they've listened. But I think, unfortunately, I was perhaps full of that unfounded optimism that seems to befall all of us teachers at the start of term. Because if the borough plan wasn't already flawed enough, they've actually increased the numbers. Increasing the pressure on services, infrastructure, on our green belt, all of those arguments that we have previously made. And I do have some sympathies with the Green members to my left. As a geography teacher, it's pained me sometimes in this chamber hearing some of the misunderstandings and misconceptions surrounding the difference between greenfield, greenbelt, brownfield. But the fact of the matter is that it wasn't the residents of Coventry that have voted us and put us here. We are here to protect the residents of Nuneaton and Bedworth and Bulkington, and unfortunately it's once again those people that it affects that haven't been consulted, and that is the real issue.
Thank you. Councillor Gutteridge.
Well, I feel for our residents of both the borough of Nuneaton and Bedworth. Well, it's 13,600. No, it's now 15,223. But that's the good news. I quote from council papers, "We have stood our ground in our message that the borough cannot accept any more land for housing beyond what is in the borough plan, and that has not changed." But wait, at Cabinet, the portfolio for planning and development said we can fit the extra housing on the existing land, but they will be more densified. Well, I looked up density, similar to Mr. Wilson. Well, density means the degree of compactness of substance or the quantity of people or things in a given area. So to accommodate these extra housings, will we build flats? No. But what will the residents lose for that? We'll lose the doctor's surgeries, the play areas, the community halls and shops. Oops, shops. Reminds me of the Ploughland deal, £1 per year for 2 years. Well, will they help other shopkeepers in the borough? I believe the last greengrocer has closed in Nuneaton. Will they be offered help? Well, I'm terrified of the extra houses and the infrastructure. I live in Whitestone, which I'm very lucky to do. I've worked all my life to get where I am, and we're going to be ruined by all these houses and the infrastructure. The roads will not take it. Coming from Bulkington to Whitestone to Nuneaton, we're queuing. The roads will not take any more traffic. Yet you want to inflict more houses. I forbid you. I forbid you. Thank you.
Jackson.
being made, it seems to me, about the borough plan rather than the motion in front of us tonight. But I've risen to address something Councillor Gran said, which is plainly lacking in factual evidence. We do have a housing need in this borough. There are over 1,000 people on this council's housing waiting list. We do have a need to provide further houses for people. You may argue about the numbers of those housing, but to say we do not have a need is frankly to deny.
We didn't have a need. I just said we didn't need 50.
To say, the comment as I heard it was, and I'm sure that the YouTube video will be able to enlighten us when we hear it tomorrow, is that Councillor Graham did say there was not a housing need. Clearly there is.
Councillor Smith.
Heard that this motion is not about the borough plan, but you can't talk about this motion without talking about the borough plan because it's an integral part of it. The second part of this motion talks about the need for a consultation on the extra housing. I'm wondering if the members opposite actually understand what a consultation is about, because we've delivered very bad consultations on the borough plan. No consultation at all on these extra 1,500 houses. But in my mind, a consultation should be a two-way street. It should be an opportunity for you to go to the public and tell them what your plans are and ask them for their opinion. And their opinion should count. And I see no action from the members on that side to actually take on board the huge amount of comments that have criticised the original plan. I see no amendments to the plan as a result of the many, many comments about the faults in it, some of which may have foundation, some of which haven't. It seemed to be an exercise of let's do the minimum we can, as they've talked about, a third-rate borough plan. Let's collect in all the arguments and we'll just give them to the inspector. He can sort it out. Well, I don't think that's a very good way of running any consultation. And I would like to understand what they think a consultation should be.
Councillor Margrave.
For indulgence. Just to respond before I leave, I'd like to make a few points. First of all, I was at a meeting, I think it was yesterday evening, with Councillor Wilson and members of the opposition and my ward colleague. And at that meeting, Councillor Wilson rightly said that this borough plan, the borough plan, is actually with the government's inspector and it's going through due process. And I think to say otherwise would be misleading. We have to be realistic. The inspector is looking at the plan and will make his decision. And this motion, actually, I don't believe legally could be undertaken unless we were to withdraw the plan and start the whole thing again, which would cost a fortune and leave parts of our borough open to developers. Because after all, the policies that the borough plan has come around because of are put in place by the government. Secondly, Mr. Mayor, I would like to say that I disagree that residents will not be consulted. Residents will be consulted on houses that are built outside the borough plan, and indeed that will be built in the borough plan. I, for one, as a local resident and councillor, object to the Gypsy Lane development and have already asked for that to come to planning committee and will go along to planning committee to put my case. And that is the way we need to go forward now. Finally, I would just like to say that I am deeply concerned at what I feel is misleading the public and also what could be wasting council taxpayers' money if this were to go through. What we're saying here is actually not deliverable, and importantly, it won't benefit the residents. What we need to do is go out and speak to local people and get them to take part in the planning applications process. We have spoken to local residents about the borough plan. Many residents responded. We now have a borough plan with the inspector, and I suggest that we leave it with the inspector and await his, because it is a he, his response. And I look forward to his response, and any lessons from that. So I thank the opposition for the motion, but I would urge you to go to planning and have your say, because you never did that about Gypsy Lane before. You never went in other occasions.
Councillor Margrave, we'll stick to the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Golby.
Under the impression that Labour were pushing for a brownfield first policy in the last election and the one before. I believe the candidate that you put up, the one before, was actually quite vociferous about brownfield first when she was walking through the fields of Galley Common with the residents. There's a radio interview on that.
This is about housing numbers and consultation.
With regards to the housing numbers, when you were discussing the meetings that you attended, and you said Coventry never said a word, well, maybe you should have approached Coventry instead of just sitting back and waiting for them to approach you. Jane Innes was the Labour parliamentary candidate for the Labour Party in Nuneaton and Bedworth. She's also a Coventry City Council portfolio holder, so you've got a lead in there. If nothing else, you could have picked the phone up. While I'm also referring to something that was said earlier on about meetings, I saw some head shaking. Councillor, or ex-councillor Bill Shepherd, who the last mayoral term was actually the mayoral consort, should I say, an extraordinary meeting of the Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council, which was held at the Town Hall, Nuneaton, on Tuesday, the 16th of October 2012, stated under his declarations of interest that Councillor W.H. Shepherd declared having been
Councillor
whipped.
Golby, I've already asked...
This goes to the housing numbers.
Councillor Golby, this motion is about housing numbers and consultation.
This goes to the housing numbers, yeah. It all counts to that.
Well, that isn't directly relevant to the motion.
Well, it is, because everybody's
not.
whipped. Okay, well, I'll publish it later, it's fine. To say that we want to delay the plan with the motion, it isn't true. We actually just want a reasonable outcome for the residents. The consultation is the key. The last iteration of the borough plan was really bad for consultation and communication with the residents. In some areas, it was non-existent. I've heard it said that the In Touch magazine is a useful communication tool, which is, fair comment. But I think the Soviets thought the same about Pravda. But not that I'm likening the borough to a communist Eastern state bloc.
Councillor Golby, you're starting to stretch things a bit, please.
Okay.
People have been very patient. It's been a long night.
Yep.
So stick to what's in front of us, please.
Well, my feelings on this is when you've missed such a important tool for engaging with the community, as in the In Touch magazine, when you said yourself sometimes it's the only way people get to see what's going on in the borough, and yet you didn't publish it on one of the most important topics of a generation for this borough. You've answered your own argument. It was a waste of time. You should have put as much publicity as you could to consult with the residents, to keep an ongoing dialogue with the residents, and it wasn't done. It wasn't done because we had periods of silence and inactivity. No one knew what was going on. Nobody could get any answers. Nobody knew the housing numbers until it was altogether too late. And I think these housing numbers that have been put out now, it was likened by one of the barristers to putting your hand down the back of a settee and finding a few quid. He actually said that it shouldn't be a surprise that we've got these numbers because we've been granting the planning permissions for these. So how is it suddenly, all of a sudden, produced in a document? This document should have been a work in progress over the lifetime of this plan. It should have been amended and put forward and published, and to do it after the consultation and after the submission. Actually, the inspector pointed out that the duty to cooperate actually stops at the point of submission. So publishing the numbers after that doesn't technically fulfil your duty to cooperate. He also said that turning up to meetings and saying you cannot take these numbers with an evidenced approach and a methodology to back yourself up is actually taking part in the duty to cooperate. It doesn't mean a duty to roll over, it means to cooperate. So why wasn't it all done? Why weren't these numbers argued at the point? Why aren't these numbers being reduced rather than increased? There are so many questions that residents want answers to, and it's like a wall of silence. We've got nearly 1,000 extra houses going up on plot HSG1. The overall plan, the overall numbers has increased from 13,372 to 15,223. That's an increase of over 1,800 properties. You cannot say on a whim, again, put your hand down the back of the settee and pull out a few quid for your shopping budget. You wouldn't plan your shopping budget like that, you know, a trip to Aldi's. Why build a borough plan on something like that? I'm done, you know.
Councillor Wilson.
I'd like to start by thanking you, because what residents might not have picked up, and the microphones certainly won't have picked up, and I think it's important to put it on public record, actually, is that a certain Labour councillor has sat there at every intervention
Councillor Wilson.
to move to the vote. And it is important that these things are debated and discussed.
Councillor Wilson, we're speaking, you're winding up the motion that's been proposed. You will note, and you've done it, that the person you refer to never received a seconder, and that's why we moved on.
That's why I'm thanking you for that, Mr Mayor.
Well, talk to the motion then.
We've already given the party opposite an English lesson, so let me give a history lesson. President Truman once had a plaque on his desk which says, "The buck stops here." Yet, for Councillor Harvey and the party opposite, the buck stops everywhere apart from here. And that is the problem. You keep trying to deflect from the key issues and blame the government. Well, another history lesson. Local plans. They were brought in, legally, by Section 20 of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act. Now, when was that Act, Councillor Harvey? It was 2004. Who was in power, Mr Harvey, Councillor Harvey? Labour. They were the ones who introduced local plans. And it was Labour who was going to impose 14,700 on us under the Regional Spatial Strategy without any consultation with us at all. Now, the Housing Market Authority, yes, there is a duty to cooperate, but you show me anywhere in statute where it is a duty to capitulate and give in to other people's issues and needs. It doesn't. And to do so is hiding behind other people and refusing to accept responsibility. Now, saying that Coventry have not spoken to us, as Councillor Golby has quite rightly said, is a poor defence. It is more like plausible deniability, because you have accepted the figures. Now, Councillor Aldington said that the Cabinet report did not say that we are changing policy. Well, it actually says in there, we can now accept the Coventry overspill. And more to the point, I know of the existence of a letter to Monica Fogarty at Warwickshire County Council, where the Managing Director on behalf of the Council has said we will now accept those figures. That is damning. I have had correspondence with officers where I asked them, are we looking at reviewing the housing numbers? They said no, and they have clearly been working on that while telling opposition councillors different. That is not on and is misleading not only councillors but the people who are elected, who elect them and expect us to represent them. Now, Councillor Harvey mentioned he was attacked by Conservative leaders. Now, perhaps it hasn't crossed his mind, and perhaps he should take a lesson in that too, that perhaps they were standing up for their own residents. That's what we expect you to do, Councillor Harvey. Now, if I was sat in that chair, to coin a parliamentary phrase, I would have the testicular fortitude to turn around to my Conservative colleagues in the south of the county and tell them no. When will you do the same and tell Labour in Coventry no? I would, you won't. That is the difference between us, Mr Mayor. I'm willing to make myself unpopular with my fellow party comrades in the interests of my residents and the residents of Nuneaton and Bedworth. That's what grown-up politicians do. They stand up for their residents. Now, they mention about Coventry not wanting to reopen their local plan. Well, I actually looked at the Coventry local plan website last night. They have submitted, retracted and resubmitted their local plan 4 times. So why can't we believe that with some negotiation and some talking, some honest talking and a decent argument, like the fact that we are the most densely populated in Warwickshire, almost 1,600, whereas the average density is 277 in the rest of the county, that is a very logical and decent and rational argument that our residents can expect. Councillor Margrave said about speaking to local people. There are people in that chamber I have spoken to constantly, consistently, and defended their interest and told them every step of the way what is going on in this chamber. Why couldn't this council do the same? Give us a decent consultation, inform us and let us know what is going on. And actually, I saw no Labour councillors at public consultations. It was only councillors on this side, and to be fair, the Greens actually went and spoke to residents and fronted it out on behalf of the council. Council officers couldn't even answer basic questions and residents' concerns about issues which were happening in their patches when we were actually deigned to give the ability to be consulted. So what I say is, let us have a proper consultation now. The taxpayers have already forked out